Hello, everyone. Happy live stream Thursday. My name's Olivia. As always, I'm very excited to be here with you all. Usually I'm here for the release parties, but today I'm here for one of our regularly scheduled live streams, which I'm very excited about because we have Tyler coming on today. He's been on in the past for both release parties and some standalone streams to talk about extension development. So we have a really great show in store for you today. To everyone watching, hello. Let me know where you're watching from in the chat. 4:03, you got here early, having your coffee with us about half an hour early. I hope that you're ready for this. It's going to be a good one. D's Computer World, I'm always excited when I see you in the chat. I'm so glad you're a fan of VS Code, and Tyler does help a lot. He is amazing. If you've done any sort of asking questions, filing issues on the repo or anything, you have definitely probably seen Tyler's name pop up. He is an amazing engineer on the VS Code team. We're very lucky to have him here with us today. Ooh, from Ann Arbor. Hello, Ed. I bet the weather's really nice there. I'm in the Southeast United States, so it's very hot and humid here, but hopefully Ann Arbor is really nice and you got all that good weather up there. From Toronto, hello. Some Canada. How you doing today? From Italy. Ooh, I love when we get all these different countries. This is great. Lebanon, from Nigeria. Oh, D's Computer World, you're from India. Hello, thanks for joining us today. We'll do one more. Hello from South Africa. Thank you all so much for being here today. I know everyone's just excited to get started and see what Tyler has in store for us today. But before we do that, during our live streams, we like to do a quick plug for our TikTok channel where we post quick shorts. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're educational, but they're always a good time. So let's go ahead and head into our TikTok Throwback Thursday.
If you want to look cool coding, install this Power Mode extension. It doesn't do much, but it makes you look good by using all these effects. Watch this. This is amazing. That's pretty cool. And you could change the effect by going into settings. And let's say I want to change it from particles to fireworks. Come over here, type in some function. It looks like I am a superhero coding. Awesome. Update user. And what is the purpose of that counter 6670X? Nobody knows, but it looks good.
That was a TikTok from Reynold. If you watch these live streams or subscribe to our YouTube channel, you've definitely seen him before. I always enjoy those videos. Did y'all know about the Power Mode extension? I feel like it just like adds a little nice little pizzazz to your coding. It really doesn't do much else other than that. But I feel like every now and then you really just need a pick me up because it's like code can get monotonous and you just kind of need some fireworks, really get that spark going. All right. I'm glad people 403 said great channel. Yes, definitely subscribe to it if you don't already. We've got a lot of content like that. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. But with that, let's go ahead and bring on Tyler, which you're all here to see.
Hello.
Hey,
hello.
Tyler. Thanks so much for being back on.
Yeah, of course. I'm just wondering, are we going to start requiring Power Mode?
We should. Like, I feel like that should be like the live stream thing. It's like, okay, let's like bring some fun, some energy to it. It's just like, boom. Yeah. But then just like maybe like you start out not using it, but then just like randomly enable it halfway through. And then everyone's just like, what is happening here? Yeah. Really get that climax. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What an extension.
Well, yeah. Thank you so much for being on here. I know we had you on I don't know, a few months ago, maybe even like closer to like 6 months ago or something like that. It's been a little while, but you came on and did just kind of like a building your first extension live stream. And literally like at the end of that, we had so many comments being like, come on, I want to see more. Like, let's do a whole deep dive. So for those of you who are in that one, this is going to be kind of part 2 of that, where Tyler's going to walk us through some more about it. And again, this is very interactive. So any questions that you have about extension development that you've been wanting to ask Tyler, now is your time. I'll be checking out the chat and asking him periodically. So it's a great time to just kind of have those questions answered.
Yeah, definitely. And even though this is kind of a part 2, I would say like you don't need to see the first one. If you haven't, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not like continuing, I guess, on from. I'm not going to be like, oh, well, remember last time we did this.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and bring up your screen. And also just, to that note, I think anything you showed in the last stream, if y'all missed it, is always in the documentation as well. So just kind of like if you are wanting to do just a quick Hello World extension, we have a lot of great documentation for that I think Tyler's probably going to go over a bit too.
For sure. So, yeah, so like usually when I do a live stream, I like try to keep it as like, I don't know, raw as possible, and like focus on like going through the docs, like doing what the people who are watching this are probably going to do after seeing this, and yeah, kind of focus on getting deep into the code itself and the docs themselves. So for this stream, I wanted to focus on a few things. So in part 1, this is the only time I'm going to reference part 1, I promise. But in part 1, just to catch you up if you didn't see it, we mostly focus from going from like literally 0 code whatsoever to an actual extension that we were able to run, that we were able to debug, and that we were able to publish to the VS Code marketplace. I don't remember what that was called, but I think it had something to do with cats.
It definitely had something to do with cats.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was called either, but there was just like cats everywhere.
Yeah, there were cats everywhere. That's right. Yeah.
Honestly, that might have been what it was called. It might have been called like cats everywhere.
Cats everywhere. Yeah. That sounds like something easier for sure. Anyway, so yeah, that was kind of the main focus on that. But then I remember somebody, and I think a couple people asked, okay, how do you test extensions? That was something that somebody brought up. And so I definitely wanted to cover that today, and we're going to start there. And then also we're going to talk about, like, okay, now that you've like set up tests, how do you like set up like CI for that? Right. Mm-hmm. So we'll like publish this code that I have to a repo and set up some GitHub actions maybe to like run those tests that we made, and then after that we can, if we have time, we'll see how it goes, but we'll talk about like running that extension in different places. So like historically you kind of only ran like an extension in one place, which is in what we call the extension host. However, as time went on, we introduced things like VS Code, like remote, and like running things on a remote machine. And so there's actually a way for you to determine, or a way for you to specify, I want my extension to run on the remote side, I want my extension to run on the client side. And then when we introduce things like VS Code for the web, that's a whole other ball game of like, okay, I want to run like my VS Code extension on the web as well. And so we can talk through that stuff.
That sounds great. It's kind of like, okay, I built an extension, like now what? Like we're going through that now what part? Okay, cool.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are the 3 things I kind of want to focus on today. So with that said, let me show you the extension that we're working on today. So I actually built this. This is a real extension that's on the marketplace. And it's called, here we go. It's called Fujio, I think is how it's pronounced. The reason why I said that is because I don't know. I just picked this random word from a Wikipedia page. But anyway, I made this extension. I'll show you what it does in a second. because I own the authentication stack, so all of this stuff in VS Code, and I wanted a way to just like create a random like access token that I could use to make sure all this stuff was working. And then I realized that this is kind of like generally applicable and useful, because there are definitely times where, you know, you might want to just like make a random access token and then use that to use that in like, I don't know, some script to query GitHub API or something like that. You're just doing like a one-off sort of thing, like, oh, I need to, you know, create a few issues in a bunch of different repos, and I need an access token to do that. Normally, you might go to github.com and like create a personal access token, but this extension is an alternative way of doing that right from in VS Code, and it creates a what's called an OAuth access token rather than a personal access token. It's a different token. I don't really need to get into the specifics there, but anyway, so
I think it's a really great kind of way to also see like how your mind works when you're like, oh, I should make an extension. Because a lot of times we have people say, oh, I'd love to create an extension for VS Code, but like, you know, I don't want to just make a theme. Not that themes aren't great, but they're like, oh, like how do I do something that other people are going to benefit from? And I think kind of the process you just outlined, that you were just working on your regular work and you're like, huh, this would be really helpful if I had this. Like that's really just, if you're kind of thinking about that as you're doing your regular development, ideas will just kind of naturally form.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's, yeah. So that's basically what this extension does. I'll go ahead and demo it to you, I guess. Let me actually install it. I uninstalled it because I was doing some stuff yesterday. But anyway, so it doesn't have an icon. I'm working on that. Very bare bones. But the idea is that I can open up, the command palette and type Fujio here. And I've got mint token and clear recents. So let me go ahead and hit mint token. And then I can pick an authentication provider. So I'll say GitHub in this case. And then whenever you want to mint a token, you need to give it a set of scopes that you need. So I've been using this extension for a while, so you can see that it has a bunch of previous calls that I have here. But if I wanted to say just like repo, I can do this, in which case I'll get the auth prompt. I'll allow that. It'll go to my browser and back to VS Code. And then, and then from there, I can copy my access token and use it as I want. So, trying to think. There was a specific script that I was using to do this, but I don't remember what it was. I don't know. I write a bunch of random scripts to interact with GitHub APIs. So anyway, so that's what my extension does. Let's go ahead then and walk through a little bit of the code. So I did clean up the code a little bit yesterday to make it a little bit more testing friendly. So I'll show you what that means. So let me go ahead and hide this, I think. Yeah, cool. So in every extension, as we covered the last time, I said I wouldn't say that again. But
we're sure zapping you every time.
Yeah. You've got an activate function that runs when your extension activates. And then you define some commands, in which case I have two commands here that you saw in the command palette. I've got mint token and clear recents. Clear recents, not too important for what we're doing right now, but mint token is the big one. In which case I'm creating a quick pick, and then I am just doing some stuff with that quick pick, and then I call I got a function here called get provider, and then I have a function called get scope list. And that's pretty much what you saw in each of in my flow here. So get provider, right? And then get scope list. And that's it. Cool. So one of the things I did last night is I pulled out these two functions into another file here. And so now I have get provider and I have get scope list as well. So by doing that, I figured this will make it a little bit easier for me to test these functions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so going back to like what testing means for a VS Code extension, when you create a VS Code extension using the Yeoman generator, which is this is a part of the hello world, it makes like a test folder, right? And it has like all these extra files. There's like this one, run tests, that has a bunch of stuff in it. And the suite that usually gives you an index.ts that has a bunch of stuff in it, and an extension.test.ts. I would say that like for the run test and the index, you don't usually need to really touch those all that much. They provide extra configuration for how you want to run your tests. But I think at least for now, we're not going to cover that. But just like skimming that, you can see that like, oh yeah, this is looking for all of the test.js files so that it picks up where your tests are. And then like this run test one is, hide this again, is basically calling this run tests function on this at VS Code /test electron module. And what this is going to do, based on the comment here, you can see is that it's actually going to download VS Code, unzip it, and run your tests.
Okay. We do have one question asking, are all VS Code extensions created with TypeScript?
You don't have to create your extension with TypeScript. You can use JavaScript instead. And like, I mean, I've not heard of any folks using a different like language that transpiles to JavaScript, but theoretically that would be possible as well. But at the end of the day, your extension either runs in a Node environment, Node.js environment, or inside of a web worker on the web. So those are kind of your choice.
Cool. You might have to take more steps to get there if you are trying out a different language.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And maybe in the future, using like the power of WASM and stuff like that, you could write extensions in various other languages. But yeah, maybe not quite there yet.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
I'm surprised we haven't had this question yet, because I feel like we always get this question when you're on. How are you making your indents colored?
Oh yeah, that's indent rainbow. That's the extension.
That's always a hit when people find out about that
one. This one, yeah.
Cool.
I love this extension. It's
so like easy to visualize that.
I love
that does that.
I like whenever I see VS Code without it, I'm like,
what is this?
I don't know. I'm just so used to it at this point, Yeah. Anyway, so maybe this is kind of implying how these tests are actually going to be run, but these tests, they're actually going to run within VS Code. And so what that means is that all of the like VS Code APIs that you have available inside of your extension, you will have available inside of your tests as well. And this kind of shows that with the same import star as VS Code for VS Code at the top, just as you would have it in your extension. And then you can even see that like the extension starts out by just showing an information message. So it's running. These tests are running where your extension will be running as well. So that allows for some pretty interesting, like, I don't know, test development, I guess.
And just to reiterate, I think you said this. So when you do kind of that first Yo code generation, when you're kind of going through that create your extension, this test kind of scaffold is created with that too.
Correct. Yeah. And I think if you like deleted that folder or whatever, going to the docs here, there's a doc, this is at this URL. I'm sure we can throw that somewhere, but in our API docs, there's a section on testing extensions. And, this like calls out as well, like if you use the Yum and generator scaffold your extension, the tests are created for you.
Okay, cool.
But alternatively, you can follow this guide, which will give you basically those same files again, the run tests and the other one, whatever it was called. Oh yeah, index.ts. In case you need to, like, you know, recreate them for whatever reason. But yeah, maybe these files look very familiar, huh? So yeah, and along with other stuff that we'll get to in a second. But yeah.
Yeah, we'll make sure that these docs are listed in the video description as well.
Cool. So with that said, let's go ahead and run these tests. I actually have one other set of tests here that we'll cover in a second. I wrote these last night, and I was playing around with some testing libraries, but I figured we start by running these tests. Now, like, again, when you use the Yum and generator, you automatically get this launch config, this extension tests, and this is great because I actually get to debug my extension. So that means I can hit a breakpoint here, hit run. You can see that VS Code starts up, and if everything works right, you can see I end up hitting this breakpoint. So ideally, there's like very little friction here to like get started writing tests in your extension, and that's the hope, is that you will consider writing tests for your extension.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I know testing is not always a developer's favorite thing to do. So yeah, anything that can kind of set us up for success is always good.
Right.
Make it as easy as possible.
You know, I mean, I sympathize with that.
I do too.
I write other extensions, and I usually don't add tests to them because maybe they're simple enough where I feel like, yeah, I think I've got this down, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, for a little bit more complicated ones, or ones that I expect like other people to use, I feel like, yeah, I'll probably start getting some tests going. So anyway, that's kind of the basics for like walking through adding the kind of scaffolding for tests, along with like debugging tests, which, you know, this is what the launch config looks like. If you're curious, it's on the docs. It's also in my code already because I used the generator to get started. And I think that's pretty much it in terms of like talking about the scaffolding part of tests. We can dive into the tests that I wrote and maybe write some more tests. That's just my excuses to do things that I've been meaning to do for a while on this stream, and like writing robust tests is something I've been meaning to do for a while. So yeah, thank you for allowing me to make time. Yeah.
Someone said in the comments that they're surprised to see the tests using Mocha and not Jest. Do the tests have to use Mocha, or can they use other frameworks?
You know, that's a good question. I think we are. I think we are locked into Mocha. Okay. Yeah, I've not heard of any. I'm not sure. Let me say that. I've not heard of any extensions using Jest or an alternative to Mocha. But yes, I'm pretty sure we're locked into Mocha. Maybe there's actually, you know what? One of the things that you can do is you can just go over to VS Code -test, I think. Yeah. And this is the testing utility. This is kind of like, yeah, this is the VS Code test electron package location. Let's see if there's anything in here. Development, maybe there's an issue. Using Jest, I feel like there's got to be an issue here. Yeah. There it is. Okay. I don't know what the gist is here, but it seems like maybe there might be a way to do it. There's some stuff going on here.
So it sounds like kind of similar to the, like, can you only use TypeScript for writing these? Like,
yeah,
for the easiest route, you'll want to use Mocha for testing and TypeScript or JavaScript for writing your extensions.
Yeah. It maybe, like, I can't skim this issue fast enough, but take a look at this one and see if it solves what you're trying. Or see if somebody's figured it out, or if it's just not possible right now.
Right.
So that's that. Yeah, a fun place. If you do find any issues with at VS Code Test Electron, this is the repo to go to.
Okay, VS Code Test.
Yeah. Cool. So, yeah, obviously this test right here, not the most useful test for testing my extension. You know, I mean, yeah, it's not really doing a whole lot, but yeah, that's a test. So anyway, like I mentioned before, I pulled out those quick picks, and this is maybe going into the deep end a little bit, but I wanted to show you how I tested some UI elements, because I don't know, I feel like the elephant in the room is like, yeah, that you can definitely write tests for your extension, but hold up, Tyler, like basically all of it's UI driven. Like, how the heck are you going to test any of that? Because you need like user interaction in order to actually do anything with the extension. So how are you going to do that? Well,
I'm glad you asked.
I'm glad you asked. Yeah. So I have these other tests here, which are phenomenally named, obviously very descriptive, and
so relatable though.
yeah. So I'll show you a few things that I think are interesting here. First of all, I was playing around when using, is it Sinon or is it Sinon? I'm sure. I think it's named after like some god or something, but I don't know the actual pronunciation of it, because I always see it on just, you know, in text.
Right, just reading it, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, it's a really cool framework for like mocking, and here we go. Yeah. So it's great for like spies, stubs, and mocks inside of your tests. So to, I guess, summarize what that means, it means that you can basically say, like, I wanna see when this particular function gets called. I want to replace this function with some dummy data. It's because I only want to focus on testing like a chunk of my code, and stuff like that. So it helps kind of like narrow the scope of what you're trying to test. So it's a super useful library, and I was playing around with it in my tests. Additionally, I have this guy, which is kind of interesting, this wait for in quick pick, which I'll show you in a second. But from a description perspective, all this is going to do is it's just going to wait for a quick pick to show up in the UI.
Okay.
So let's talk about this first test here. First of all, my function, what it does is behind this bar again. So it you pass it in what's called an iProvider quick pick item. This is nothing too special. It's really just a normal VS Code quick pick item, which looks a little something like this. It's got like a label, maybe a description, etc. Nothing too bizarre. Let me go back here, and then I also pass in. With this low resolution screen, I feel like I need to.
Oh yeah, it probably looks really weird for you on your actually in person.
There we go. Yeah. So then I also pass in the quick pick reference that I'm going to be like operating on. And so what this does is it returns a promise, and that's important. It returns a promise, and it's just basically going to set up that quick pick to as we saw in the example. It's going to set this quick pick up. It's going to use those recent providers to show those, along with add use custom value at the end of it. And then when the user selects one, we're going to do a couple things. I actually don't remember why I have this if block here, so I'm just going to skip over that one. But basically, if you use custom value, then you'll show an input box so that the user can put their own value. Otherwise, we're just going to have the chosen item be the one that they picked.
Okay.
And then additionally, if the chosen provider requires some VS Code setting to be set. So an example of this is GitHub Enterprise auth provider requires you to set a setting to like a URI or something like that in order for it to work. So this if is just like saying, oh yeah, check if it has a required setting. If it does, then get the configuration and check to see if the setting is set, basically.
Okay.
Some very light validation. And if there's no setting, then reject the promise. And if that's all good, then resolve the chosen item, and that's it. Is that good? Make sense?
Yeah. So it seems like if you have any sort of quick pick selection, this is kind of the general testing that you'd be able to do. Like you kind of always follow this general formula,
right?
And then add in your own extension logic.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So this is what the function does. So in our tests, what we're going to do is we're going to call that. But you notice that like I'm not awaiting that promise, and this is when we get a little crazy here. I'm not going to await the promise yet, and instead I'm going to do my crazy function that waits for the quick pick. In other words, it's going to wait for this to show up, right? And then I'm going to call these two commands, which are kind of wild. So part of the VS Code API is the ability to execute any command that VS Code exposes. Is this execute command API. And where do you get these commands? Well, VS Code tells you. So if I open up the keyboard shortcuts, and this is how I found this out. If I open up the keyboard shortcuts, I was looking for something to focus the quick pick. So I was like, I don't know, focus. Sorry, but spelled correctly. Focus. And then I was like, okay, Q. Okay, here we go. And so then I saw this guy here, workbench action focus quick open. And I was like, oh, this could be what I wanted to do. So yeah, and then I just right clicked on that, hit copy command ID.
Okay.
And then now within my extension code or within my tests, I can actually call that function, that command, trigger that, right? And so what this will do is it'll make sure that the quick pick there, this guy is in focus, and focus isn't like, I don't know, somewhere else in the UI.
And you said that any command you can execute this way with the API.
Yes, any command. And some of them, which is cool, some of these commands, they actually like return values. So you can see in my code here, sorry for jumping around too much. You can see in my code here that I'm not doing anything with whatever these return. I'm just like kind of executing them. But if we look at the definition, we can see that it returns a venable of unknown. So, if I knew, say, that this execute command returned a string, right? I could be like, I could do this, and then A is going to be a string here because I know that this command returns a string.
Okay.
So, this is like this. It almost feels kind of like I'm like hacking VS Code.
Right, it does. Like,
yeah. But this is like,
things.
I think when it comes to testing VS Code extensions, sometimes you do need to control VS Code a little bit to test certain components of your extension. There's certainly like I kind of skipped over the like, I don't know, easy or unit tests where you're just kind of like testing input and output of like, I don't know, smaller chunks of code. I figured like, people can probably figure that out by looking at docs on just how to write tests in general. But I think where VS Code tests are kind of unique is this concept of like, okay, well, I've also got a UI attached to this that I need to kind of push along. So
yeah, I think that's a great call out. And definitely like probably a lot of people here might not even know that you can do this.
Yeah. And so then there's this other one here, which is accept selected quick open item. And believe it or not, that will basically hit enter on whatever is selected here. So in my case, I have GitHub selected here, so it'll hit enter and then proceed.
Okay.
Cool. So, oh yeah, I was looking at my second test here. But anyway, so that's what those two do. And then, so at that point, keep in mind this get provider just shows that first quick pick, and it's going to return the result of that quick pick. And so then now that I've selected my item, now I will await my promise from before, and then I'll get my result, in which case I can then verify that the result I get back is in fact GitHub. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good.
So it's like, I'm going to start the flow. I'm going to like fire off the flow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to wait for that quick pick to show up. Then I'm going to call some commands to tell VS Code to do some user interaction. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually wait for that value from the promise above that I like fired off asynchronously. And I'm going to see what it actually gave me back. And then I'll like verify that the answer is what I expect.
Yeah, I think that like waiting later is what threw me off at first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like, it's one of those like weird JavaScript asynchronous code funkiness to it. But yeah, that's how I have this test set up. And then before I run these tests, I figured I would just show you the slight difference I have here in this is called the error case, not ASDF2. And this is called I don't know, happy path, I guess. So the error case here is the GitHub Enterprise one, where I need this setting to be set. And I can actually see this setting here, GitHub Enterprise. Yeah, so I need to have this setting set in order for this auth provider to work. So I have this required setting property. And what we expect based on the code that we were looking at before is that this should reject because I don't have this setting set. Okay. And so now we're using some funny Sinon magic here, where, yeah, this is kind of a weird line, but let me see if I can like break it out here so we can actually see the whole thing. Yeah, so this assert is calling, yeah, let's do maybe something like this, and then is that I don't even know if that's any better, but okay, this actually needs to go. Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah, there we go. Cool. All right, so assert is the normal node assert library. What we're doing here is we're kind of like, we basically in that code, the get provider code, I show an error message if the required setting isn't set. In other words, this VS Code API gets called. Okay. Right. And so what I had set up a little bit higher up in this code, very simply, is I basically told Sinon to watch this function. To spy on it, so to speak. And basically what I want to do here is I want to just make sure that this function was called. Okay. Because you know, I'm checking to see if the promise rejects, and that's all great. And I'm checking to see why it rejected. But I also want to make sure that that error message was shown to the user. Okay. And so I'm doing that with this by saying, hey, double check to make sure that this was called and that it was called with this particular parameter. Okay.
So Sinon is pretty much just like constantly watching or like spying on that API on that function. And then at the end, you're like, okay, and that whole time it was watching, let's verify, let's assert that this was called once, and specifically when it was called, we got this GitHub Enterprise URI.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And then I have this casted here. That's only because like if I don't have this, then I get this error because this is the VS Code API. But when you set up the Sinon spy, you need to like say, oh, this isn't just the normal API anymore. It's now a normal API, and it also has all the spy properties as well.
So is this generally how you would verify that like any sort of message did pop up?
Yeah.
In the UI? Okay.
I think that this is a great way to, I mean, the beauty of the VS Code API is that you have a function here, and you within your extension say, hey, I want an error message to show. I don't like control what the like HTML of the error message is or anything like that. That's abstracted away from me. VS Code handles that part.
Okay.
I can guarantee that an error message will be shown to the user if I run this function, because the VS Code team has guaranteed that for me, right? But I need to make sure that I actually call this function, right? I need to make sure that my code is doing the right thing, which is to say, I need to make sure that my code is actually running this function so that it shows to the user.
Right. Yeah. So it's not like, I feel like we probably get some people who like do this and they're like, VS Code's broken because it's not showing the error message. But like really it's, are you doing the correct thing to trigger this error message being shown is what.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, this whole spy thing sounds complicated to set up, but it's actually quite easy. So let me show you what I did for that. So I'm using Mocha's idea of like a before each and after each, and these are functions that will run. Maybe you can guess. Before each test and after each test.
They did a good job of naming these.
Yes, excellently done. So what I do here is I create a Sinon sandbox, and basically this is like, it's an easy way to kind of set up a bunch of things and then be able to like completely tear that down really quickly. So I create a sandbox here at the very top, and then before each test, I spy on this particular function. Okay. And then after each test, I restore that. So
okay, so that's how you initiate being like, start watching this, and like at the end, I'll check to see if this was called. Okay.
Yep.
That seems very straightforward. Cool.
Very straightforward, right? So yeah, that's what these two tests do.
And someone had a question about cancellation token. So Illusion MH said, is cancellation token only used to fulfill method interface, or it somehow would be used by test runner for long running tests?
Right now, it's just to fulfill the interface of this wait for in quick pick that I wrote. So I'm not doing it. I'm not like using the source here to cancel it, I guess. I guess I could refactor this to say, I don't know, to like pull this source out to maybe here, and actually here. Let's do something like this. This is probably better anyway. So we'll do this, and then we'll go source cancellation token, and then actually this doesn't make any sense. What am I doing with this? I don't know. I mostly added it there in case I had a good reason to cancel this operation.
Okay.
But I don't yet have a good reason to do that, so I don't know why I added that. Sometimes, you know, you write code and you're like, I feel like this is going to be useful someday. And then it's not useful. But,
and then someone asks you about it, and you're like, yeah, no, that's just kind of there. Like,
yeah, it's there for a good reason.
No need to ask. There's
Don't
a reason there's no comments.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, there's nothing special. Maybe there's a way for me to I don't know. I guess what I could set up is like Mocha will already cancel a test that takes too long. So if a timeout is hit, and I think it's like 2 seconds, then the test will fail. which is great. So maybe like, I can set up a thing that's like, if the test fails, then cancel the token, like call source dot cancel, something like that. Maybe I need to do that. Maybe I don't. Yeah, it's not a important detail, but maybe if I want to surface like a better error message, I can say like, I'll do like a set timeout of like 1,000 milliseconds or a second and be like, okay, this didn't happen in a second. The problem is this code here.
Right.
So if I wanted to give like a better error message, I think that was kind of my original reason for it, is like, I wasn't going to let the test runner time out the test, but I wanted to say like, oh, it's because you were stuck waiting for the quick pick. That's why.
Okay, makes sense.
The test failed. Anyway. Right. So I will show you this in a second, but I figured we covered a bunch of stuff. So let me just run this test and make sure that they still work from last night.
This is always the fun part.
Yeah. I guess they did, because I ran them earlier to show the other thing. But yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. Okay.
Did you see that?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So I hit start, and then you can see the quick pick doing its thing, right? And then if I go over here to the debug console, you can see I have 3 tests passing. Ooh, they're all passing.
Woo!
It's great. Great, they still work. Yeah, so those are my tests, and I think it's kind of fun to watch.
Fun.
To watch like the quick pick flash.
You could even really quickly see where the error message popped up too, like at the very end. You can see.
Yeah,
the
error message. Yeah, which makes sense. So yeah. All right. So this one, I guess I'll show you this because it's a little crazy. I figured out how to like wait for a quick pick, and the reason why I do this, right, is get provider is a promise, as we mentioned before. So we don't really know at what point the quick pick is actually shown to the user, and we need to make sure it's there before we execute these commands, if that makes sense.
All right. Yeah. Because what are you going to be executing if it's not actually there? That makes
because
sense.
Like you can see there's a bunch of other stuff that we do here. We like set these properties, but the quick pick has not been shown yet. So these properties are here. This is just setting up a listener. So that's not, so we don't actually show it until here at the very end. So that's why I was like, well, I want to make sure that this UI is actually visible before I go and run those other commands. So I needed a way to make sure that was the case. So I found this way to do it, and like it's kind of weird, but follow me on this.
I like it. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's a little strange. All right, so, but it's not a lot of code, so I feel like it's worthy of like, it'll be in a repo somewhere, and feel free to copy this and then yell at me if it maybe, I don't know, just be gentle to me. All right, so we've got like while the token is not canceled. I don't know why I think Copilot wrote this for me. Come on. All right. So while the token's not canceled, then we're going to run this other command. So remember before I said like some commands actually return a result. This is one of those commands. It's just called get context key information. So I don't want to go deep on context key stuff right now. There's a whole document on specifically this stuff alone in where is it? It's in here somewhere. I promise you that. Oh, it's under reference at the bottom. It's when clause contexts. Yeah. So I'm trying to think about how to summarize this in like a nice sentence. So VS Code basically sets what's called a context key depending on what it's doing in the UI. And you typically use these inside of like your package.json under the contributes section. So what I could do is something like, oh, I only want to show this command when say, sure, yeah, this is fine. When, I don't know, when the file of the open editor is JSON. Obviously, I wouldn't do that, but that's an option. There's all of these little like context conditions that you can add that will like help you kind of control when commands are exposed to the user.
Okay.
I don't want to get too in the weeds with this because there's like a lot here. But I would defer you to take a look at this when clause context doc to take a look at some of the stuff that you can do here. It's pretty interesting. If you ever want to like see if so this is if your editor is in a specific language, or if you have a Git repository open, another random one. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff.
So it's kind of like determining when the command would be like most relevant for the user, like figuring out whatever that clause would be. Okay.
Yeah. And so here in like the menus section of the package.json, you can say, oh yeah, show this command in the Explorer context. I think that means like when you right click on a file in the Explorer, that context menu that pops up, only show this command in there when this is satisfied.
Okay.
Something like that.
Cool. So that way you're not just like inundated with like commands all the time. Okay.
There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. Like, yeah, you can do operating system checks. Yeah, and this is the important one in Quick Open. This is the one we're going to focus on right now. But yeah, look, I mean, like, gosh, look at how many there are. There's so much.
It would also help the discoverability then of the command, right? Because it's like they'll be doing a task and then they would then see that and they'd be like, oh, what does this do? It's probably relevant to what I'm doing right now. Okay. Yeah.
And you are like experiencing this even when you don't realize. Like I feel like a good one is say like when we open like a markdown file. So let me select markdown here. And if you noticed, this icon popped up. And this allows you to open the preview to the side, so I can like do this and see my preview of my markdown file. But like that's not applicable for every language. Like I don't need to open the preview of my C++ file. Like that doesn't make any sense, right? It's markdown. That makes sense. So there's likely a context key for this particular command that says, oh, show this command in the, I forget what the name of this part of the UI is called, but here, show it here when the editor language is markdown or something like that. So that's kind of how that
makes sense.
How that plays out. Anyway, so I figured I would take advantage of that in Quick Open context key by running something like this. So let me hide this again. All right, so I found this function called getContextKeyInfo. And what that does is it returns an array of, the object is a little bit bigger, but I only really care about the key here. And it basically returns the context of the current state of VS Code. In other words, every context key that is currently active based on the UI state of VS Code.
Okay.
So maybe you see where I'm going with this. So basically, this loop just calls this, gets the result, sees if the result has some item with a key of in Quick Open, And if so, then then great. We are inside of a quick pick.
So it's kind of just like constantly looking at the state of the UI until it sees that in quick open is there, which means
Correct.
quick open is visible.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And cool. Then I this is probably my bug to fix since I own quick pick land. But I noticed a little timeout was required to like give VS Code just a split second longer to render the UI.
Okay, so basically like the key might show, but like there's like a split second where it's not actually showing. So then if you executed the command, then it wouldn't do it because it's not technically there. Like it can't actually focus on it. Okay.
Yep, which to me sounds like a bug. Like if this is active, then there should be a quick pick shown.
Right.
So I think maybe some logic is reversed there.
Good to see the workaround though.
But yeah, workaround nonetheless. So anyway, like I can go ahead and like hit play on this, and we can break when this happens, and see that result is massive. It's got so many different things in here. Yeah.
This is like, cool just to see like all the things that like you don't realize are going on in VS Code that's like constantly cycling through. This is awesome.
Yeah, and then there's some like description as well. So like let's see. Some of these you can see type, and that means that they can return something. I believe it means because you would care about the return value if it has a type. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, there's so much. Oh, look, I found in quick open.
Oh, that was quick.
327. Wow. That I feel like that was pure luck. Or this is the type of this is the type of the context key. So in quick open, it's either true or false.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so Boolean type.
Right.
Okay.
Makes sense. Anyway, so there's a bunch of stuff in here that you can feel free to go forth and play with. But all I needed for my use case was the ability to wait for a quick open to happen.
Okay.
So that's what this does. And then it breaks out of this, and we continue with our tests. Not that one, this one. And that's how these tests work.
Cool.
Yeah, it's I mean, there are simpler tests that I could have shown you, but I felt like showing a little bit more complicated scenario will, I don't know, get the creative juices flowing of the people watching.
I think it's really interesting because I mean, it's not like a ton of code, right? This isn't files and files and lines of code.
Right.
But I feel like if I was just thinking, okay, how do I test this? Like, I feel like I would have thought it was way more, like it is a complicated test case. I would have like thought it would require a lot more, but just to be like, hey, you have access to these commands that you could just easily call. Hey, all you need to do is wait for the quick pick. Like there is a lot already baked into the API. I feel like that's one of the big things with extension development is just like really understanding the API and what is available for you to use is kind of the key to really being able to whip these up.
Definitely. Absolutely. So, yeah, shoot. How much time do we have?
I was going to say, we're almost at the top of the hour. I have some time if I know you might have like other meetings and actual work to get back to. So we can definitely go over if you want. But we also are kind of at that top of the hour if there's a good wrapping up point.
That sounds good. I was expecting to cover a lot more, but we just got into the
you know what that means, Tyler. That means part 3.
Part 3, yeah, that's right. We're just having too much fun, I guess. Well, I mean, I think this is still good. If anybody has any questions, maybe I'll just do that because I think that the next topic would probably take a little bit.
Okay.
It wouldn't be as long as an hour, but
right, yeah.
but maybe a good stopping point would be here.
Cool. So chat, let us know any questions you have about extension development in general, what you've just seen with testing that Tyler's shown, so we can take advantage of his time here.
And I guess I'll point to the thing I was going to say.
If you want to just go through a quick doc review.
This is what I was going to cover next, which was continuous integration. We actually have a doc specifically for this. And the reason why we call this out is because as you saw, the tests work by actually spinning up VS Code and like running actual VS Code and running your tests inside of that. So typically when you're in a CI environment, though, it's usually like a Linux container, or, I mean, of course you can run your tests wherever you want, but like a lot of the times people will use a Linux container because it's like super fast spin up. So there are some gotchas that are involved with that, because the Linux container doesn't have things that you would normally expect if you were just using it as a desktop operating system. So this doc here on continuous integration tells you the steps that you need within your pipeline to make sure that VS Code runs correctly.
Okay.
So, and you can see that here. It's like, oh yeah, I need to start XVFB, which is X virtual frame buffer, I believe. But anyway, this is basically running like a desktop environment, which is something that VS Code requires. So that's kind of how we're like getting the tests running here. And so this is Azure pipelines, but we got like GitHub Actions down here, GitLab CI, Travis CI, a few others. Yeah, super important if you like want to set up CI, which you should. I mean, you already took the time to write tests. You might as well run them automatically, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm always really impressed by how much documentation too, just all the extension API and the testing has on the VS Code site, because there is so much here just to kind of get you started. So definitely check all this out.
Yeah, I mean, the hope is that like we have enough docs to help you be successful in doing what you're trying to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we do a pretty good job. But like at the end of the day, if you feel like there's something missing here, you've got a couple of options. One, if there's something missing on a particular page, you can always hit the edit button here. And this will actually take you to the web version of VS Code Dev. And I'm sorry, I'm going to switch over to Insiders since I like to be on Insiders. But this will switch over to VS Code Dev, where it will go ahead and open that document, and then you can like edit it here and then send a pull request to us with that content that you wanted to add. So if you wanted to do something like that, or you can just go to the repo, which is somewhere. It's hard for me to figure out where it is because of this this like mobile view that I'm getting.
Yeah. You're so zoomed, yeah.
Yeah. But in any case, it's this repo, the VS Code Docs repo. Mm-hmm. And you can always open an issue here if something is not quite to your liking, and we can take a look at it to make the docs better.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Someone did ask, sounds like they're getting started with VS Code extension development. They said they want to know how to launch it in VS Code after creating their VS Code extension. So if you either want to show that or just maybe even show in the docs where they can find the information, either way.
Yeah, so if you go through the Yeoman generator, and this is actually a great way for me to plug the part one, because we do talk about this in the part one. But if you follow the steps to create a new extension, which is here, your first extension, you call yo code, and then what you see is like a bunch of these files here. And then from there, it actually already scaffolds things out for you. And you should be able to just hit F5 or run extension, this particular launch configuration. And then your extension will be running. And it's actually, and the other window there is attached to it by debugging. So as a proof, I guess, I will place a breakpoint here. And you'll notice that this breakpoint isn't bound yet, and that's because my extension is not yet activated in the other window.
Oh.
There we go. We'll do this, I guess. Gosh, this is so small. And then if I go over here and I do, what's the other command? Oh, I forgot about my package.json.
Oh.
Yeah. Like, what? Why isn't my command showing up? That's odd. Okay, where did the thing go? All right, here it is. So I think my breakpoint's still there. Yeah, good. So now if I run mint token, oh, why did my breakpoint not hit? Let me try that again. Curious. It's very difficult to check here. That's unusual. Hello? That seems like an issue. Maybe in my insider build. Let me try. I expected that to hit the breakpoint. I'm not sure why it didn't, but let me maybe just for reducing variables here, let me uninstall the one I already had installed.
Okay.
And we'll reload that. Oh, you know what? I think I know what it is. I was making some changes to this code, and I don't know if I have this task running. So when you run F5, it should... Okay, this looks okay. I just wanted to make sure these tasks were running. They usually run automatically when you run F5. But anyway, let me go ahead and kill these. All of this stuff is covered in that like getting started doc. But yeah, you can see. All right, so now my code is successfully compiled. Now let me go ahead and run the extension, and then hopefully this works. Oh,
it looks
I think
like
it works.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I had some like stale code or something.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. And so from here I can do whatever I want. In the debug console, go like quickpick.title equals hello person that asked a comment, and then that's just going to set it there again. Hang on. Now we'll do that. And continue.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's a great plug. And I also think it's really good too to see, right? Like you just had to kind of quickly reload, but you're able to kind of put the breakpoints in. Like, this is still development. So every now and then you might run into a quick, got to rebuild and get that up and running for it to go. Yep,
for sure.
Cool. Again, I know we're kind of over time, but hopefully you have time for this last.
Yeah. I've got time.
Okay, cool. Hey, Alessandro. So Alessandro asks, what about testing user interaction with VS Code would Playwright be used?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like that's a different kind of test. I think these are more focused on like integration style testing, where you're not necessarily testing the UI of things, but rather you are testing that you are interacting with the VS Code API correctly. If that makes sense. Whereas with Playwright, and I don't know if there's much like usefulness in this. Maybe there is, but with Playwright, you're like actually like interacting with VS Code from outside of VS Code. So as if like you were actually just like a user clicking and doing things like that. And I think that's worthwhile. Certainly we do this for VS Code itself by having a bunch of smoke tests that we call smoke tests that use Playwright to click around VS Code. And you can certainly do that for your extension as well, probably. But yeah, I mean, I guess the question I have is like, if you're not really in control of the UI using the API, then you probably don't need to necessarily test this way. That said, if you have, say, your own web view in your extension, then sure, you probably want to test that in like a smoke testy kind of way, because there you're in control of the entire UI of that web view, and in which case, like, yeah, okay, then that's probably a viable like reason for using something like Playwright. But it's, it's I would say it's not as easy as these tests to set up. So only do that if you feel like you would benefit from doing something like that.
Okay, that makes sense. I think we saw someone in the comment actually say that they're big in extension development and they have something with custom web views. So if you're still watching, sounds like this could be a good option for you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. So it's like what you were doing was kind of more, you said, make sure that like the API and the commands you're expecting are being called and that your extension is reacting in the way that you expect, is more so kind of looking at that API level rather than what you would think of with like, okay, I'm clicking this. It's more, you're kind of bringing it to a like lower like computer level, like what's actually going on.
Right. Yeah. And like, I mean, like generally, if you can avoid like a web view or a custom editor, like that's kind of ideal, because using the API that VS Code has that does UI things means that you have one less thing to worry about. You don't have to worry about like the UI of your extension. You just kind of depend on VS Code to provide that UI. Now, obviously, the API is not completely robust to fit every scenario that you want to do, and so that's why we do have the web view and the custom editor like APIs. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the like can of worms. You can open that can of worms if you want to and go down that rabbit hole.
Right.
But honestly, like for my personal like extensions, I try to avoid web views as much as possible, because that adds so much work on me to get the UI right. So I try to use the other VS Code APIs as much as possible.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I acknowledge that, you can't do everything with those.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, I think that was our last question. I know we're a little over. So Tyler, thank you so much for being here today. I know this is something that people have been asking for a while. I know we also just got started with testing. So I think there's definitely the opportunity to have you back on and talk even more about extensions, because this is always a popular one.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to plug at the end or talk about with extension development before we sign off?
I don't think so. I'll put this code somewhere. So I think I'll put it here in this VS Code Fujio stream repo.
Okay.
So truth be told, like I have a different repo for this called VS Code Fujio, which has some older code that I wrote. And this actually runs entirely in, I didn't get the chance to cover this today, but it runs entirely in a web worker extension instead of a node extension, because I didn't need anything out of the more powerful node extension host. But so for the sake of like showing people what I actually worked on today, I'll put all of that stuff in this repo.
Okay.
And then at some point I'll bring what we did in this stream over to that repo and then publish a new version. But yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, we'll definitely, everyone watching, we'll make sure that gets in our video description. So that way you can come back to this and then check out the source code.
Cool. And then this is what Fujio is, in case.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I understand what
I guess apparently it's like a coin from like designed by Benjamin Franklin back in like 1787. I was like, I need a mint a token.
Oh, that's so good.
mint do minting of money. Money. What would be a cool name for money? And I was like, oh, Fujio, that sounds interesting.
I love that.
So that's where that came from.
Cool.
This
This is what we
honestly,
love, Tyler, like seeing a glimpse into your mind.
yeah, this coin's like kind of intense. Like, I don't know, there's like a
Oh.
baby's face, I
It
guess.
looks like it looks
And
like the
then
sun in the Teletubbies, you know, like in the
it
Teletubbies
does.
have the sun. Yeah, that's exactly what it
Yeah.
looks like.
And then it's like, mind your business. Like, geez, that's a bit
Oh.
harsh, Ben.
Franklin was a little testy when he made it.
What's going on there? Yeah.
I'm having a bad day.
Yeah. Very like angsty, I feel like.
That's so funny.
Yeah. And then the back, we are one. That's nice.
Oh, okay. So it's like
Yeah.
testy, but in the back, it's like, no, we're all into this together. Yeah.
Yeah. What mood are you feeling today?
Right. That's
Want
you
mind
flip
your
it, and it's like,
business,
is
or
today going to be
more-
a good day? Is basically
Yeah.
what it is.
Is
That's
this where
awesome.
they get, what side of the coin are you on?
Yeah. Oh, probably.
Yeah.
It all comes back.
Anyway.
Okay,
All right.
cool. Well, thank you so much, Tyler, for sharing this. I do want to do just one plug. If y'all don't already know, we do have a GitHub discussions forum specifically for extension development Q&A. So that's a great way to just kind of post any questions you have and get interactions. We'll bring some of the engineers in sometimes if there are questions specific to that. But it's a really great community where you can just hear from other people working on extensions and get any of your questions there. So that link's showing on the screen and will also be in the video description. Okay, well, with that, again, thank you so much, Tyler. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can watch this replay, as well as part 1 of Tyler's stream from a few months ago. So if you are just getting started with creating an extension, that's a great one to check out. And if you love cats, it's also just a great one to see what Tyler can do with VS Code and cats. All right, thank you, everyone, for watching, and we will see you next week for another live stream. Take care.